Spider-Man 2 was finally released and I love it. Well, when I get to play as Spider-Man.
Norman must guess they left more.
And this time around, there are 2 Spider-Men to play as, so you get double the fun. And overall, my experience with the game was good and great, but there are parts of it that I found pointless or just absolutely hated. Before I move on, I want to remind you guys that anytime I'm about to review a game, I tend to play it live on my Twitch channel. So if you ever want to come in and just chat or get an early opinion of mine live, come hang out. We have a good time doing so. The gameplay is top notch. I mean, this really does feel like a next gen game. The swinging is spectacular. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, there are new additions like the wingsuit, which can have you flying around like Superman from time to time, but overall this game focuses on giving you a better gameplay experience and making it more fun rather than trying to make things too realistic. However, I have seen that you can go down into the options and switch up how much the swing assist is so you can take fall damage or run into things, or your momentum actually is more immersive to how swinging is if you want to have that type of experience. So I appreciate the option there. However, with this more gamey style of play comes some problems and issues, and get used to this. For every part of the game that I like, there's going to be a small tidbit that I really don't like and want to critique. Combat feels just as good as ever, where you get to combo, string things together, use your gadgets and new abilities. However, to compensate for the double Spider-Man, there's been changes made to Peter. He now has more abilities that align a lot like Miles, and in the Miles version of the game, I was okay with him kind of being really beat him up using his powers, because that's kind of how he is in the comic books. He leans more on his abilities more than he does on his wits and smarts, and Peter's always been kind of like the technological genius. And where I think it's super cool that Peter uses his gadgets and it has a lot of high-tech technology, kind of like Iron Man, to take out his foes. I don't know. I just don't feel like I'm playing as Spider-Man as much. I feel like I'm this overpowered god that can go into any situation and just overwhelm my enemies with my abilities. Honestly, once you start leveling up some of these gadgets and abilities, you become crazy strong. You know those stealth parts of the game which kind of influenced how you played and it would make things harder in the first game, and it really incentivized you to use stealth and to use kind of like your wits. I mean, there's even a part in this second game where Spider-Man says, I prefer to fight smarter and not harder. That's just not the case here. You don't need to use stealth at all, and whereas you end up having to fight reinforcements, it just means you get to beat people up and you get a little bit extra experience from it. The game never punishes you or forces you to be stealthy, and you always have the option for it, plus you get rewarded, but I never really found a point in being stealthy. If anything, it always just felt faster to beat everyone up. On top of that, the game seems to confine you in an arena, especially with the boss fights. There's always just like a dome or some excuse to have you fight in this WWE style ring, and it kind of bummed me out. One of my favorite things in the first game is when you're going up against some of the Sinister Six members and you're kind of just out in the world fighting them, and you get to swing on buildings and you're in mid-air, and then multiple people are coming after you, and it's just this really cool experience that you can only have as Spider-Man, which is kind of taken away, and it feels like we've taken a step back in the combat when it comes to fighting bosses. Sure, it starts out strong with Sandman, but it only ever kind of like is hyped or peaked at that point when in terms of variety and ways that you can combat the enemies inside of your arena dome. This goes without saying that the combat is actually a lot of fun. Sure, you're a more high-tech Spider-Man that can do all these crazy and whimsical things, but it is really satisfying to just take out drones and drones of enemies. The boss fights are still really fun themselves. There is a new mechanic when it comes to countering enemies, where you can choose to counter or you can choose to dodge, but with boss fights there are times where you can only dodge certain abilities or only counter other abilities, which makes this great mix up and always keeping you on your toes. And actually, even playing on normal difficulties, I can see how it can be challenging to fight the bosses. And it's not a punishing mechanic either. And even though when you're really fighting someone, you're waiting for a big blinking light to tell you what to do, it still gives for a challenging experience. The timing window for those attacks can be very small, and if you got too used to just spamming the dodge button too often, it will punish you for doing so. So fighting bosses tends to be a very fulfilling and satisfying experience, and where the gameplay can be really fun and engaging and make you feel like a demigod with all your robotic gadgets and superpowers. They know how to just suck the life out of you by making you play as a robot spider, or making you play as Mary Jane, or making you shoot hoops, or go to a carnival and ride rides while you get to press a cheer button. Probably some of the parts that everyone disliked the most in the first game, Insomniac decided to double down, whereas you get to play as Mary Jane some more, but this time she has a gun. And like, I get it. I get wanting to make Mary Jane cool and compelling, but I just don't care. I don't want to play as her. She's not on the cover of the video game. But if I'm gonna be honest, I did have a lot more fun with the Mary Jane portions of the game this time around than I did last time. I'm gonna be real. I can't help but say this again, that the game focuses on having more fun and creating more fun gameplay than it does trying to create a immersive world. This is really seen through the side missions. A lot of the side missions can get a bit awkward, as they are just trying to find an excuse for Spider-Man to just beat up a bunch of thugs with guns. So you can think you're on an innocent mission on trying to help some high schoolers, but in the long term you see that there's some weird heist going on and you have to beat up some guys, or a teacher gets kidnapped, and it can get kind of quirky really quick. On the other hand, there are some crazy good side missions that you would think would fit into the main mission. Do not hold yourself back from these side missions. And I really like the transition between Miles and Peter. The game, even though you can go back and forth and play who you want at any time, I feel like when you're doing story missions and they send you back and forth between the two, I got an equal amount to play both of them. And I would spend some time doing some side missions when the game set me up as Miles, and then I would spend some time doing missions as Peter, and I just enjoyed doing that. There was a caveat when it came to playing between the two of them, and that was that you have a shared pool of experience. So if you're really just looking to burn through this game and you're not someone that wants to enjoy the open world game, and trust me, I get that. I'm kind of the same way myself. You might feel like you're lacking in abilities if you're trying to split them up, because there are like 3 different skill trees to look at, and of those skill trees, they all branch out. They do share gadgets, so when you're upgrading those, it's not as bad. But at first I was worried and I was a bit upset that I had to share those points between so many skill trees, but doing just things around the city, I didn't do a lot, mind you, and also just doing the main mission will give you a ton of tokens and experience points to allow you to spread them out evenly, and usually whoever I was playing was who I would dump the points in at the time, so it just kind of worked out. It was really well balanced, and I enjoyed the skill trees, and they offered up some really powerful and fun things to add to the game. The story was probably my favorite part about the first Spider-Man game, and going into this one I was really looking forward to it. And where I enjoyed the story and I really liked it, where they made moments count where they needed to count, it suffers from just having weak characters. The plot is crazy strong and really easy to get enticed into, but the character motivations are very lacking. And I can't really talk more about the story without getting into spoilers. So I'm going to have to go into that. If you haven't gotten to this game, I definitely recommend it, but we're going to spoilers now. So you've been warned. Kraven and Venom are the main antagonists in this story, and where they both have really great stories, it just feels like the characters kind of just fall flat. Like Kraven, for example. I like the idea that he's basically Batman with prep time, but he's dying, and so he wants to go out in a blaze of glory. So he captures the people that he wants to fight, he examines their weaknesses, and then, you know, he fights them, he duels them to the death or hunts them down. It's really cool. It just gets taken away by just him having a huge army of hunters. Like, it is actually overwhelming how many goons he has following him, and it takes away from the whole experience of enjoying that character. Even within the confines and the merits of the story that is given to me, I just can't believe that this character would send out all these goons to go and capture a person for him to kill him. It just didn't make sense, and it kind of contrasted with who he was. But the reason for it is that Spider-Man needed guys to beat up out on the streets, and we needed something to do. So Kraven has to have a militia in order for us to accomplish our fun. Venom, on the other hand, is done really well. I've always said in any of my movie reviews or video game reviews that I am always happy to change the source material or adapt things if it's telling a good story. And so for Harry to actually be Venom this time around is really compelling. I mean, these Spider-Man games have always changed and made their own kind of universe and how things worked, and through good writing, it always feels like they're taking in the right direction, which I appreciate to no end. It makes sense for Osborn to kind of just be so obsessed at keeping his son alive and to be pushed to the edge so that in a sequel we're going to get the Green Goblin. On top of that, for Peter to become the anti-Venom in this story also makes sense, that he's the only one that can save his best friend. There are a lot of moving and connecting parts, and I really appreciate and enjoy the fact that the story does well at making references or taking a twist on something that we already know and putting it in a story with characters that we love and running with it in a way that is compelling. This includes incorporating it into the gameplay. Like seeing Mary Jane turn into the Scream symbiote was something that I was surprised to see, but also made for a really fun boss fight. Listening to them talk about their issues to one another while they're fighting, and her being influenced by the symbiote, but also having a super interactive map to fight her in, made for a really compelling and engaging boss fight. Peter and Miles seem to be lacking when it comes to their characters, however, which sucks because they're the main characters that we spend most of the time with. I think Peter had a lot more stuff to do in this game, where his best friend comes back and now he's being taken by the symbiote, or friends are being resurrected from the dead and they have to go fight a fire cult, or his girlfriend is having issues and she herself feels like she's sacrificing a lot to make sure that they're running. But Pete himself seems to be like, when it's going good, when you have these moments and you're playing as Peter Parker, they are really boring. Like, there's this whole scene where we go to the carnival with MJ and Harry, and it is absolutely dull. We get nothing from the characters. There's no back and forth. They don't really say anything that pertains to the plot or the story. And now that MJ and Peter are together, they just act like a sweet little couple with nothing going on. It was a lot more engaging in the first game when there was drama between them, and now it's just kind of like, I just want to say, okay, well, next, what's going on? All the while, the biggest problem that Miles has is not being able to write a school paper. Couldn't we give him something else within this runtime of the game to worry about? I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but what I'm trying to show here is that really Peter had this huge mountain of issues to worry about, whereas Miles' issues didn't seem as impertinent to them being Spider-Man. It's just hard to connect with those characters when they themselves are handling things that don't seem to bring out the best in their character. I think when Miles chooses to forgive the Negative Man and help redeem him, those are the highlights for Miles, but him being like, no, I don't want my best friend or my mom or my future love interest to be mad at me, when in his real life there's like nothing going on that's causing that stress. Everyone seems to be really supportive of Miles and really there for him. It just seems like there's this weird contrast, and like, okay, we kind of like focused more on Peter's story than we did for Miles. Overall, you can kind of see why I have such a complicated relationship with this game, where it gives such a strong, compelling plot, but weak character motivations or character scenes. And then also the gameplay is super fast-paced and kinetic, yet they only allow us to do so much from it, and it regresses from the first Spider-Man game. And then we still have scenes where he plays Mary Jane. So with that being said, I gotta give Spider-Man 2 an 8 out of 10. Until next time, play nice.